and we're going to talk more about her website. And I know all of you, if you don't already, after our last interview, get her newsletter. I know you're going to want to after we talk to her. Let me just go through some headlines before we get her on here. So I'm just going through headlines. Aetna will exit California's individual health insurance. United Health to exit individual insurance market in California. White House delays employer mandate requirement until 2015. This all out this morning, by the way. Wellmark says no to exchanges for now. That would be in South Dakota and Iowa. Boehner came out with a brilliant statement, said Obamacare is a train wreck. Do you think? Maybe it just took him till this morning to figure that out. And the big news is Democrats are trying to suppress and confuse and hide the cost of Obamacare. Well, there's a news flash. I guess they are, and they certainly don't want to see this happen and people to get too aware of what Obamacare has in store for them prior to the 2014 November elections, the midterm elections, as I indicated yesterday on my program before any of this news came out, that we're likely to see a strategy similar to that. Now, first of all, Twila, welcome to the program. I sure appreciate you being with us.
Thanks, Dan. Great to be here.
Twila, I got so many things I could talk about. We could probably do about 3 hours on just Obamacare, and I don't even know where to start, but I'm going to play a little clip that I'm going to want you to comment on. And before I play that clip, let me just remind and tell our listeners once again. Twila Brace is the president of, well, first of all, I believe she is one of the foremost authorities on Obamacare. Now, you all have heard many guests that I've had on this program, including congressmen and senators and other so-called experts. And I think Twila is better than any of them. And she knows more about this health care bill and the issues that we're going to have with it than anybody. And she is president of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Her website, folks, if you don't get her email newsletter, her e-news on all of this, you need to do that. And it's CCH, Citizens Council for Health Freedom, cchfreedom.org. cchfreedom, all one word, .org. Twila, I want you to listen to this clip. This clip just out last night. It was from an ABC report speaking to a doctor in California. You may have heard it, but listen to this. Go ahead, Devin.
I went into medicine to make a difference in people's lives.
But Dr. Robert McWilliams says he's going broke.
I haven't paid myself a salary since October 2010. It's the last time I took a dime home from my 40-year practice. Medicare,
Medicaid, and insurance companies are paying doctors less. Dr. McWilliams says for 2 years he's lived on his savings because it takes all his income to pay staff and run his office.
It's going to be run by bureaucrats, and it's going to be run by politicians who have no idea what is in your best interest. Then I'm getting out.
He's not alone. Other doctors are beginning to close their practices, worried about the Affordable Care Act, which goes into effect in January.
If you add millions of 20 million, 50 million Medicare patients to the system, but you have no doctors to take care of them, what good is the system?
Closing, though patients and staff alike don't want to close. But Dr. Robert McWilliams says he can see no other way out.
It's going to hurt me, but it's going to hurt the patients more. And the patients need to realize that.
Yeah, patients need to realize that across the country. Unfortunately, patients needed to realize that before the last election. They didn't realize it then. I believe they certainly will realize it in 2016 when this all begins to sink in. But these comments from the doctor, all I could think about is his statement about we're adding millions more people to to healthcare, and we're going to have fewer and fewer doctors. Are you seeing this where you go, Twila? Are you running in and seeing more and more of this and are concerned about this?
Well, I think that doctors are making decisions today about what their future is, and I think a fair number of them are planning on retiring early, just like Dr. McWilliams, or they're going to change their hours, or some of them are going to go cash, and they're not going to be involved in Medicare or Medicaid, which adds adds as well to what the doctor was saying, because if you aren't involved in Medicare or Medicaid, it means you're inaccessible to a whole bunch of people that have coverage. They have a document, they have a piece of paper that says that they can get access to health care, but whether they can actually get access to health care is a completely different question. One statistic that I've heard is in the next 4 years, or 4 years from now, 44,000 doctors will be no longer working, so we're going to be decreasing them by 44,000 at the very same time that we are increasing the Medicaid population by around 16 million, and then the exchange population by another 14 to 15 million. So a total of like 30 million more people who have a piece of paper that says that they're covered but may or may not access health care.
Wow. Let me get an update from you. You mentioned exchange. Let me get an update from you on the administration, on Obamacare state exchanges that are supposed to be operational by October. What can we expect from that? I by the way, got my letter last week from Aetna saying that my plan was not grandfathered in, and they're going to be telling me what my options are in October, November. But what are the state of these exchanges? What's going on with that, Twila?
Well, the exchange story, I think, is an interesting one. Just as a point of reference, I guess, 16 states plus the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., have decided to go forward with state exchanges, which simply means that they are the ones who are going to be funding the apparatus and all the operations. The other 34 states have said no, and they are the ones who the federal government is trying to create a so-called federal exchange in order to allow people in the states to have access to this new federal bureaucracy called the exchange. And so I think the question is whether or not the state exchanges will be ready and whether or not the federal exchange will be ready. Some of the states that had said yes, like Idaho and New Mexico, decided that they didn't have enough time to get their operations and the whole computerized network that is part of the exchange. They didn't have enough time or money to pull this off by the October 1st deadline. So they told the federal government that they would accept the federal exchange for at least a year. But the federal exchange is not a sure deal. The government has said that it's going to be ready by October 1st, but when pressed for details like how well is the Federal Data Services Hub, which is the central piece of the exchange, how well will that be working? Is it really operational? And so I think there are questions as to whether or not this whole thing will work come October 1st. But likely in some of the states, the state exchange may work, but if it can't connect to the Federal Data Services Hub and that doesn't work, then even the states may not be able to have their exchanges run forward.
So the Federal Data Hub is basically all of our information on a federal computer, or is it just data as far as care, treatment, doctors, and cost?
Well, let me just be clear about what the exchange is. So the exchange is 5 things if it's a state exchange, 4 things if it's a federal exchange. So let's just go with the federal. It is a website that you go to apply to the federal government for exchange coverage, and there's an application form on that website, and there are different options for coverage that you can pick. And as soon as you press send to send your application to the federal government, the second part of the exchange takes over, which is the whole computerized network that connects the website to the Federal Data Services Hub, which is the third part. The the Federal Data Services Hub is an information gathering tool. So once you press send, that little send goes across the computerized network and it pings the hub. And then what the hub does is it gathers information. It goes out and gathers information from the state agencies and from the federal agencies across that computerized network and looks up information on you, like your tax status, your family status, your income status, your citizenship status, your incarceration status. So all of this information it gathers on you, and it compares it with your application. Then the fourth piece of the exchange is a new federal system of records, essentially a federal database. And all that information from your application, as well as from the state agencies and the federal agencies, is all then put in this brand new database to be kept in perpetuity, as far as I know. And so that's what the exchange is. And the hub itself is the one that goes out and gathers the information across the IT infrastructure and then sends it off to the central database once the decision of your enrollment has been made.
So they're going to make a decision of whether you're eligible to enroll in this exchange through all this information. That's
correct. They have to decide whether or not you're employed and whether or not your employer offers affordable coverage under the Obamacare definition, and then whether or not your income is within the 100% to 400% of federal poverty guidelines, and then if it's out and if it's in there, then you can get a federal subsidy paid for by taxpayers, of course, or if it's outside of that realm, if it's higher, like 401%, then there will be no subsidy. So it has to have all this information on you. If you're an illegal, if you're not here legally, then you cannot purchase coverage on the exchange. So then you would be, they wouldn't allow you to. So there are all these stipulations upon which they will decide, one, if you can get coverage on the exchange, and two, whether or not it can have a federal subsidy attached to it.
So what are our options so that we don't have to press that send button?
Yes. Well, our preference is that no one enrolls in the exchange. And so that means that if you choose to do what we hope that you will do, which is not to press the send button and not to enroll in the exchange, not to be in this federal coverage system, because you are not going to get private coverage from the exchange. You are applying to the federal government for coverage. So this is, in essence, what we call Medicaid for the middle class. It is a new Medicaid program. Whether or not you pay part of it or all of it, it's still you're applying to the federal government. So if you choose not to get exchange coverage, if you choose not to get Obamacare, then your choices are to find a product outside the exchange. And if you cannot find a real, true insurance product, private insurance product outside the exchange because they've decided to get rid of it, like Aetna is deciding to drop all their individual coverage in California, for instance, then your choice is to go to perhaps a health sharing organization like MediShare or Samaritan Ministries, or, of course, you can go uninsured and then pay the penalty, which is significantly less than the cost of coverage mandated under Obamacare. And then when you get sick, to then choose to go into the exchange if you must in order to get coverage.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you are advocating, obviously, that we don't go into the exchanges, as I would as well. Are there any states still holding out that they're not going to do these exchanges?
It's a little interesting trying to find that information. So there's 34 states that have said no. But of those, they've said no to the state exchange. And the only difference between a state exchange and a federal exchange is who funds it. So if it's a state exchange, it means the state funds it. If it's a federal exchange, it means federal taxpayers fund it. Okay.
So Twila, let me interrupt you for a second because I need to ask this question. I'm afraid I'll forget. If the CBO, when they scored this bill, did not anticipate the fact that 34 states were going to push the government to set this up. I don't think the feds, assume that as well. So this is going to add billions, leading to trillions more dollars, not to mention the inefficiencies and ineffectiveness that now the federal government is going to have to bear that they probably did not anticipate on bearing. Is that a true statement?
That is. As a matter of fact, if you look at how the law is written, you can see that what they say is every state shall set up an exchange. But because they knew that they could not constitutionally require every state to set up the exchange, they had a fallback position, which was if the states did not set up their own exchange and therefore fund it, then they would have to create a federal exchange and make it available to people in the states where there is no state exchange. And so, indeed, they have asked, at one point they asked for $750 million to build it, and they didn't get that from the U.S. House, and now they have asked for $1.5 billion, and the U.S. House has said no to that. So they are scrambling for where to find the cash to make this happen, and they are pulling it out of other funds in order to set up the apparatus, including the Federal Data Services Hub, which is the center of the exchange. I call it the central server, and then in every state that has a state exchange, it's essentially like a dummy terminal that the two are connected. So it's the hub is critical to the functioning of the exchange, and it's been very expensive for them to build. I can't remember right now how many millions of dollars, but it is millions and millions of dollars.
Twila, let me hold that thought for a minute. We have to go to a break. When we get back from break, I want to hear, I think it's imperative that we continue to put a little meat on the bone here as far as what these exchanges mean. I'm speaking to Twila Brace. Twila Brace is the president of is the president of cchfreedom.org. It's the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. cchfreedom.org. You can sign up for Twila's newsletter. Make sure you do that. We'll be right back.